Oh, wonderful. We have a couple more of us joining. As we get started today, just welcome from the Professional Development Committee for AIAEE. We're excited to have y'all here. And as a reminder, this is being recorded so that way we can share it with other members in our entire membership that are unable to join during this time. And I'll kind of give you a reminder of that at the end. But as we get started, I want to introduce Dr. Grady Roberts at the University of Florida. He has graciously agreed to share some of his knowledge with us. He's going to take us through monitoring our online footprint. You know, how do we make sure that we are representing ourselves in multiple fashions as academics, as individuals? So without further ado, Dr. Roberts, I will hand you the floor.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I'm very willing to take questions either during the presentation and then also at the end of the presentation. You can throw those in the chat if you want. Lacey will be monitoring that. Let me get my screen shared. Okay, so can I get a thumbs up if you guys are seeing the PowerPoint and not the presenter's view? Perfect, thank you. I've got two monitors I'm working off of, and it's always confusing. Oh, you guys are seeing presenter view?
Seeing presenter view.
Oh, dang it. Let's see. What about now? Okay. You know, this whole Zoom thing is new to all of us. We just learned it like last month, right? We've not been using it for 5 years. So I'm happy to be with you guys and share some perspectives. And, you know, I suspect that many of us are pretty comfortable with our personal online presence through various social media and such. But we've probably, as a group, paid a little bit less attention to our professional and our scholarly presence online. And so I wanted to share a few things with you all about what that is, what that looks like, and why it matters. So I've got some slides that I put together to kind of give an overview. And then I've got a handful of websites that I'll pull up as examples. And we're going to talk, I'm going to introduce you to both researcher metrics and journal metrics, and then talk about how all of that comes together in terms of our professional presence online. So again, we're going to go through researcher metrics, researcher profiles, journal metrics, and then some tips for visibility. So the tips part is where I hope that you guys that maybe haven't considered some of this can figure out what are you doing, what are you not doing, and what might fit your specific situation. So some key concepts is that when it comes to our scholarly presence online, most of it comes down to citations of your work. Now, that's an imperfect measure of impact, but it's a very quantifiable measure of impact, which is why it's used quite frequently. The idea being, if more people are citing your work, then more people are reading your work, and then theoretically, the work that you're doing has greater opportunities for making impact. What's also a key concept is that every single piece of online scholarship, whether it's a PowerPoint presentation that we upload, whether it's a journal article, regardless of what it is, aside from the file part that you can see, behind the scenes, there's a whole bunch of metadata attached to that file. And the metadata is what the web crawlers search and crawl to be able to pull together what the essence of what that is. And so the metadata, like for example, on a journal article, the metadata would include the article title, all the authors, the ORCID numbers for the authors, email addresses, keywords, the abstract, all the references, and so forth. So all that is embedded in this metadata that's behind the scenes. It's also important to note that all of the stuff that we're talking about today can be unethically manipulated if someone chooses to do so. And if that's kind of a side conversation, but do know that there are people that try to manipulate their numbers and do so in an unethical way. So let's first think about ourselves and our individual research metrics. the first one in this particular snapshot comes from Google Scholar. I don't remember which researcher we pulled this from, but if you've not played around with Google Scholar, if you go to the researcher profile section, and if you don't have a Google Scholar profile, I would encourage you to start your own. It's really easy to do. But you get some basic data presented in Google Scholar listed like this. It has the citations, and this is so this is for the person's career, and then also since 2015. This is a little bit old since we've updated it. It does the last 5 years in this last column. It also shows then the citations over time, and this person seems to have a nice trending upwards. This was taken in the middle of 2020, which is why that's not too high. Then you see a couple of statistics, H index and I-10 index. The H index is a fairly common one that's used across lots of different scholarly profiles. The I-10 index is unique to Google Scholar, and I'll show you what those guys mean. So the H index was originally created by a guy by the name of Hirsch back in 2005. And to put it simply, the H number is the number of articles that have been cited that same number of times. So as an example, an H index of 5 would mean that a person has 5 articles that were cited 5 times each. A 10 would be 10 articles 10 times each, a 20 articles 20 times each. And if you're visualizing that, you can probably see it's an exponential curve. And so as you start getting higher and higher, getting one level up on the H index means that it has to, you have to have that many more citations. That's the H index. The H index is fairly commonly used. And so a lot of people are pretty familiar with the H index. Google Scholar has this other one called I-10 index. And it's unique to Google Scholar, but it's the number of articles that have been cited 10 times. So if a person has an I-10 index of 15, that means they have 15 articles that have been cited 10 times. And again, if we go back to this slide, you can see it'll tell you your career numbers, and it'll also tell you for the last 5 years. And so this particular person is relatively early in their career, right? Because their last 5-year numbers and their career numbers are very similar. Once you've been around for a little while, like me, you start to see some changes and a little bit later, I'll pull up my Google Scholar profile, and you guys can take a look at what that looks like for someone that's a little bit more seasoned like I am. Okay, next, researcher profiles. So much like many of us have our Instagram and our Facebook and those sort of things, as a researcher, you should also think about having your own presence online through a variety of different profiles. Google Scholar is a definite must. And chances are you already have stuff that is, if you've published anything, you have stuff that is showing up already in Google Scholar. You just have to go claim your account where you can then kind of manage what's there, because sometimes it will attribute stuff to you that may not be yours. I will occasionally get this medical researcher from like the 1950s that'll pop up in my stuff. I'm like, no, that's not me. And so I have to remove that stuff from my profile. Google is in our field, Google actually does better than most other things in that Google is pretty inclusive in terms of what it will pull into your profile. Some of the profiles like Web of Science and Scopus are pretty restrictive, and they may not capture the essence of everything that you've done because they only pull stuff that has been published in their respective indices. But Google will provide those citation numbers that we looked at a little while ago. And then Google will also pick up publications that aren't just research articles. Some of you might do extension fact sheets. Here at UF, we call them EDIS documents. Some of you might do other things that Google will pick up. As an example, right now, my most cited scholarly work is the research agenda for the American Association for Agricultural Education. So that's not a research article per se, but Google Scholar picks that up. And Google, it'll also let you search for colleagues, and I'll show you some of those features a little bit later when we jump over and I show you my profile. So Google Scholar is a must. The other one that I think is a must is called ResearchGate. And some of you may have ResearchGate profiles. If you don't, I strongly encourage you to open a ResearchGate profile. ResearchGate allows you to share a lot of information, and ResearchGate also allows you to upload full text versions of your articles. And I think the value that ResearchGate has is that particularly for people from the global south who may not have access to the same library resources that some of us in the global north have, um, it allows researchers to gain access to some of your research that they otherwise may not. Now, you have to be cautious when loading full text into ResearchGate, because if it's an article that a journal still owns the copyright for and it hasn't been publicly released, it's not open access, and you load it in ResearchGate, you're likely to get your hand slapped and asked to pull that down, because some journals that don't have open access, they make their revenue by charging fees for access to articles. Another cool thing though about ResearchGate is you can load your own stuff in there. Like say you've been asked to give a talk and you have a PowerPoint presentation. You can load the PowerPoint presentation into ResearchGate. You can actually assign it a DOI number in ResearchGate so that then it has a stable link to be able to find that information. And so ResearchGate has its own set of metrics similar to Google Scholar. So ResearchGate, I also think, is a must. Now, Scopus. Scopus is owned by Elsevier, and it's a privately run index. Scopus is an index that has journals in it. It's somewhat exclusive, right? So all journals don't get accepted into Scopus. You have to go through a rigorous screening process. And then as a researcher, you can have a profile in Scopus. The downside in our field right now with Scopus is that Scopus only counts stuff that is published in journals that are in their index. And so many of our journals are not in Scopus. So when Scopus looks at your individual researcher numbers, it's not going to get a complete picture of your work because it's only going to pull up your work. The example that we have here is Amy Harder and myself. Many of you guys know Amy. So Amy's numbers, in terms of total productivity, my numbers are better than Amy. But if you look in Scopus, Amy's numbers look better than mine. Largely because the Journal of Extension is in Scopus, and Amy has published extensively in the Journal of Extension. I've only published a little bit in the Journal of Extension. I do know that many of our journals are working to get inside Scopus, and hopefully they will soon. Right now, in terms of our broader field, the journals that are most relevant to us that are within Scopus are the Journal of Extension and the Journal of Agricultural Education and Extension, which is the journal out of Europe. So that is Scopus. ORCID. ORCID is, I can't remember exactly what that acronym stands for, but basically it allows you to obtain an individual researcher number. And that's helpful, particularly if you have a really common name, or if you have published under various variations of your name. As an example, I'm Grady Roberts, but Grady's not my first name. Thomas is my first name. So I have, in various forms, whether I've tried to or not, I have published under Thomas Roberts, Grady Roberts, T. Grady Roberts, and once in a blue moon, somebody messes it up and does it Grady T. Roberts. And so the indices might all think those are all different people, but with the same ORCID number, it's easy to pull and make sure that it's all from the same person. And so if you don't have an ORCID number, you should do so. It does not cost anything to do that. And then within ORCID, you can auto-populate, or you can load your own stuff into ORCID, but then you can also, once your ORCID number is attached to an article, if that publisher is set up correctly, when an article is published, then that article will automatically show up in your ORCID profile. You don't have to go do it manually. So in terms of the individual research stuff, At my university, in December of each year, we have to do kind of an end of the year report. And so at the end of the year, as I'm updating my Vita and I'm preparing my annual report stuff, I just make it a part of my activity then to also go in and check my Google Scholar to make sure it's grabbed all of my most recent stuff, check my ResearchGate and upload stuff that's not in there. I check my ORCID profile to make sure that things are loaded up in there. And so that way it kind of maintains everything up to date. So that's the researcher stuff besides what I'm going to show you at the end. So let me pause here and see if there are any questions I can answer specifically related to researcher profiles.
And I am watching the chat too, so if you just want to put your question in the chat, that would be fine. Oh, we have a raised hand.
Yeah, go ahead, Kiba. Keba, how do you say your name?
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Kiba from Botswana, Botswana University of Agriculture and Natural Resources. My question is, of these areas that you have covered, journals and organizations, which ones would be appropriate for developing countries where the university is still young and developing, but trying to encourage academic staff to work and publish on these journals?
That's a great question. And so there's really two pieces of what you asked. One is what journals should you try to publish in? And then the second is which of these metrics sorts of things should you focus on? And I think,
Yes.
You know, there's no cost to ORCID, there's no cost to Google Scholar, there's no cost to ResearchGate. And so I would encourage all researchers, regardless of what kind of university or institution they work for, to have presences in those. Then when it comes to looking at the types of journals to publish in, there's a lot of things to consider. One is the fit of the research that you've conducted with the aims and scope of a journal. I second is, there are limitations to most of the research that we do. Some journals are very, very rigorous in terms of what they will and won't accept for publication. Some journals are way more liberal in terms of what they will and won't accept. And so you're going to want to try to get into a journal that's a reputable journal that has a pretty high readership. And then you also have to consider many journals now will have publication fees, particularly if you want to have an open access publication of your work, and all that has to be taken into consideration. In our field, a handful of journals that are frequently used. One would be the journal owned by the association, the Journal of International Agricultural and Extension Education. Another one would be a journal that I'm the editor of, which is called Advancements in Agricultural Development. The Journal of Extension is relevant for some of the work. The Journal of Agricultural Education and Extension is relevant as well. Of all the journals in our field, the Journal of Agricultural Education and Extension is the best indexed at this moment in time, but those are subject to change. So those are just a handful of journals that you may look at. Any other questions before we move on? We're about to jump into journals themselves. So journal metrics, and what I've discovered in the 20 plus years that I've worked in our field in higher education is that there's a lot of incorrect assumptions and misinformation and not necessarily in a bad way, but ignorance in terms of journal metrics and what that means and how we should be considering the journals that we want to publish. And so the idea being is that the better indexed a journal is, the more likely that it's going to be read more and the more likely that it's going to be cited more. And I say more likely because it's not a definite yes or no. If you publish here, you automatically get cited more. but the more highly indexed journals tend to be cited more, and the smaller journals that don't have quite a big of a presence tend to be cited a little bit less. So to clarify a couple of things, indexed versus impact factor, those two terms are misused occasionally and sometimes used interchangeably, which is incorrect. So to be indexed basically just means that a journal and the content of that journal are included in a respective index. There's a lot of different indexes available. As an example, Google Scholar is an index, Scopus is an index, Web of Science is an index, and there's multiple different indices that a journal could be listed in. Some of the indexes are very exclusive, meaning a journal has to go through a rigorous process to be included. Web of Science and Scopus would be two of the most exclusive indices. Some indexes, like Google Scholar, are very inclusive. A journal doesn't have to do anything, and Google Scholar will start discovering its content. And so, there's trade-offs, right? If you find a journal that's indexed in Web of Science, you can feel reasonably comfortable that what's being published, that journal is run in an ethical and moral way, and that the content published in that journal is probably pretty reputable. But that's not to say if a journal is not in the Web of Science that it's not, but you can just be more comfortable to know that a journal has. Now, impact factor is a measure of how frequently articles in a journal are cited. And there's multiple versions of impact factors. Many of the indices have their own version. Scopus calls it a cite score. Some other places call it an impact factor. But the de facto gold standard impact factor is calculated by the Web of Science. And I'll show you what that's actually calculated, how that's calculated here in just a moment. But impact factors are recalculated every year. And so, so just because a journal has a respective impact factor in one year doesn't mean that that will be the case, next year and the year after and the year after. Most journals now, aside from publishing or posting their most recent impact factor, will often do like a 5-year average impact factor, so you can kind of get a sense for what's being published in that journal. Yep. Okay, so here are some examples. Google Scholar, the directory of open access journals, is one that's open to only open access journals, as the name applies. Scopus, and then Web of Science. Web of Science has kind of two levels within Web of Science. The Emerging Sources Citation Index, excuse me, let me take a drink. And then the Social Science Citation Index. There's actually, at the upper level, there's the Social Science Citation Index, there's the Science Citation Index, and there's a couple more. The work that we publish will be in the Social Science Citation Index. So when Web of Science accepts a journal, it goes into the Emerging Sources Citation Index first, and that's kind of a trial period, kind of a test period where they're kind of seeing how your journal is going to perform. And then once it reaches a level where it performs at a certain level, then it's elevated up to the Social Science Citation Index. And so as I mentioned earlier, the gold standard impact factor is calculated by the Web of Science, and it's published annually in its Journal Citations Report. And it is a measure of the number of citations the average article got that was published in the last 2 years. I think that's exactly right. And so as an example, so when they published the 2024 impact factors, which will come out probably sometime over the summer, they will look at articles that were published in 2022 and 2023, and they will the average number of citations those articles have received since being published. And then that's a way that they calculate the impact factor. As an example, you know, the Journal of Ag and Extension Education, I think, has an impact factor of like 2.3 or something like that, meaning that those articles that were published over the last 2 years in that journal at this point in time would have roughly 2.3 citations each. Now, if you look at, the big players in journals in terms of impact factors would be journals like Nature, Science, the New England Journal of Medicine, those sort of journals. Journals that most of us are going to publish in are probably going to be in the 1 to 4 range of an impact factor. So here's a snapshot of what I was able to find. These are abbreviations for journals, so I'll give you those names. And JAE is the Journal of Agricultural Education. JIAEE is the Journal of International Ag and Extension Education, which is the one associated with us with AIAEE. JAC is the Journal of Applied Communications. AAD is Advancements in Agricultural Development. JHSE is the Journal of Human Sciences and Extension. JOLE is the Journal of Leadership Education. NACTA Journal is published by the North American Colleges and Teachers of Agriculture. JOE is the Journal of Extension, and then JAEE is the Journal of Agricultural Education and Extension. And as you can see right now, JOE and JAEE are ahead of the others in terms of their indexing. JAC has been accepted for Scopus, I believe. I don't know that it's in Scopus yet, but it's been accepted for Scopus. I can speak for AAD. We have just applied for Web of Science, and later of this year, we will apply for Scopus. Hopefully we are successful, but it's a rigorous process to go through. So that's journals. Let me pause here and see if I can answer any questions related to journals.
I have a question,
Okay.
Roberts.
Oh,
So
go ahead.
as a young faculty, if we're considering, because sometimes we hear, well, you should be publishing in the higher impact or the higher ratings or whatever. Should this be something that we're looking for of where they are actually indexed as well, if we're considering where to publish some of our work, if it fits within the scope of multiple journals? Because that's a thing that I think we sometimes forget to talk about is journals have a certain scope, but if it fits within multiples, how do we make that decision?
That's a great question. And so to have a true impact factor, the journal has to be in the Web of Science. So if the journal's not in the Web of Science, even though publishers might throw something out there to mimic an impact factor, the Web of Science is the gold standard. And so if it's not indexed in the Web of Science, it won't actually have an impact factor per se. So there's trade-offs, right? Because oftentimes too, the journals that have higher impact factors know that a lot of people want to publish in those journals, and they often have high publishing fees associated with the journals too. So there's a trade-off of, where should I try to get this published, where it has the potential to be read the most and cited the most, and where can I afford to have this published? Now, some publishers will give you an option of publishing in open access or not publishing in open access, and then the fees would be different depending on which option you choose. The research supports that if you publish open access, you're going to end up getting more citations for that work. And so I generally try to publish open access when at all possible. But you can sort through. I do recommend not publishing all your stuff in the same journals. Early in my career, I was very guilty. There was like 2 journals that I was sending all of my work to, and neither one of those journals had a very broad readership, which means early in my career, a lot of my research wasn't widely available. And so I probably missed out on some early career impacts just because of that. So diversifying the places that you publish, I think is good. Some of the big publishing companies, have a pretty neat tool on their website where you can upload the abstract of your journal, and it will tell you the journals that it thinks might be appropriate for your work. Like Elsevier, Sage, Taylor and Francis, I think all of them have sources or tools like that. Now, I do want to caution, some of you may have heard the term predatory journals, and I don't have any slides up there, but I'll mention a few things about predatory journals. So predatory journals are journals that are, their whole model is primarily a business model where they are accepting things with the purposes of generating revenue off of publication fees, not necessarily because of the rigorous scientific review process. There's a group called Cabells, Cabells, that keeps a list, and they have a good list and a bad list. And so most journals will apply to get in the good list because that means they're not in the bad list. The bad list are journals that have been deemed to be predatory. And so predatory journals might have a very high publication fee, but they're almost guaranteeing that your work is going to be published. And so you want to be cautious of those. There's one big publisher called MDPI. I can't remember what that acronym stands for. It's a group out of Switzerland that's a relatively young company, and they went from publishing 0 journals to now I think they have over 100 journals that they publish like within 10 years, and some of their journals are indexed quite well, but the company as a whole has been gaining some attention about some of their practices, and so I am in those journals at the moment until the dust settles to see what the reputation of that company is going to be like. Because particularly as a young researcher, you'd hate to get some of your research published in a place where all of a sudden it was going to be skeptical, or it was going to be looked at with scrutiny just because of the place that it's published. Other questions about journals? Okay, so some tips for you elevating your own research. I've got a few more slides, and then I'll jump off, and I've got several web portals open that I'll show you guys some things. One, get your ORCID number. It doesn't cost anything. So if you don't already have one, get an ORCID number. But then also make your profile in ORCID public, and then load your stuff into there if it's not auto-populating. You can load grants, you can load positions, you can load honors, you can load lots of stuff into your ORCID profile. Make sure that you have your profiles up and running on both Google Scholar and ResearchGate. On ResearchGate, make sure that you are uploading your stuff, the full text versions of your stuff, as you can. And then also, your presentations, your posters, your fact sheets, you can load all sorts of stuff up into ResearchGate. And remember, it can generate a DOI number for you if the item doesn't have a DOI number. And then regularly check your profile. Like I said, I do mine annually to do updates. I'll periodically check my Google Scholar just to see what's happening, see which of my pieces are being cited. And so Google Scholar updates every couple of days, and so it'll refresh, and any new thing that happens. Within Google Scholar too, you can also set it up to get notifications, so you can follow researchers where you will get notifications of when they publish stuff, and then you can also set it up for notifications for your own work. I don't have it listed on this particular slide, but a couple other pieces of advice related to general social media is it seems like 2 social media platforms are being used a lot to disseminate research. One is Twitter, or X, whatever you prefer to call it, and the other is LinkedIn. So if you don't have a Twitter account and don't have a LinkedIn account, I would encourage you to get both of those. Or if you have those accounts and maybe you want to create separate ones for your scholarly profile versus your personal profile, then you can do that as well. But you can make all sorts of connections. And it seems like over the last couple of years, like 2-3 years ago, Twitter was by far where most people were active. What I've seen in the last couple of years is that LinkedIn is becoming more and more of a presence. And I think some of that is due to when Elon Musk took over Twitter and changed some of the settings and stuff. A lot of the researchers jumped over to LinkedIn. And when people get new research published, they'll send it out over LinkedIn and Twitter. Or if they highlight a presentation and send it out. So just things for you to think about. And again, there's no cost for Twitter or LinkedIn, at least for the base counts. So aside from your own work, one piece of advice too is to, as you are conducting your research and you're developing your lit reviews, be sure that you are citing research from very reputable places, including Web of Science and Scopus articles, because there's a pull effect, right? I talked about that metadata. You guys have probably seen on some websites where when you look at an article, it'll tell you all the articles that cited that article. And so, that's a way for, if you cite an article in, even in the journal Science, right? If you cite a journal in Science, on the Science journal website, under that article, under the cited by site, your article is going to pop up there as an article that cited that one. So it's kind of this giant spider web, if you will, of how everything is interconnected. So if you are citing, really high quality works, then that's going to make notice of your work having cited that. When you get a request for a full text copy of your work through ResearchGate or through something else, share it, because that's more likely that people are going to be able to cite it. Share your work via social media. I mentioned Twitter and LinkedIn. Publish when you can in the journals that are indexed in the right places, right? Because you're going to get a more likely chance of your work being read and then cited if your work is published in those higher index journals. Publish in journals that are making full usage of all the metadata. And to be honest with you guys, some of the journals in our field have been very slow to adopt this. And so some journals, in terms of the metadata that they're posting, it's only partial. And so the more complete the metadata is, the more interconnected it is. Publish some of your work in journals in the Web of Science. That link right there is where you can search and find out which journals are in the Web of Science. Clairviate or Clairvate, I'm not sure how you say that name. That's the name of the company that owns Web of Science. And then publish your articles in journals that have larger readership. Some of our journals were very slow to adopt an open access policy, and consequently, some of the work in our field stayed behind passwords for years, which really, really reduced the readership. So that's the end of the presentation. Let me see what questions you have here, and then I will share some of the websites I have. Okay, go ahead, Keba.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prof. I think there's need for you and me, we discuss this again further, because as you were presenting, I was just thinking of my my university and how it can benefit from the presentation. I will be attending the conference, but we can also discuss it when we are there or through an email, because I'll share with my supervisor or my vice chancellor on the presentation. I informed him about it, that I'll be attending this meeting this evening, because this side is in the evening,
Absolutely.
this side is during the day. So
and
maybe it can benefit my university.
Yeah, I'd say I would be open to doing a similar presentation for your university too, if you thought that was would be helpful.
Okay, that will be fine. Then I'll share with him so that he can be the one communicating with you so that we can see how it can be done to the university and when it can be done. It will benefit us. Thank you so much. Hello?
Okay, let me share. Yeah.
I was gonna ask, as we had a question section, I did have one for you, Dr. Roberts, is, a lot of this is, we think about it as faculty members, as young professionals that are looking to publish in these various journals. Do you have any tips or considerations that might be valuable for those that are in extension that are not publishing in those journals, but maybe writing some of those white papers, some of those other reports, and just some of the various other aspects of our membership? Some tips and ways that they can monitor some of this to be a well-read and well-published professional, even as grad students too. Any
Oh,
advice
absolutely.
or tips
Absolutely.
for those?
So the Journal of Extension, which is in Scopus and in the Emerging Sources Citation Index in Web of Science. So it's actually indexed quite well, better than most of the journals in our field. The Journal of Extension will publish, they have full research articles. They also have research in briefs, and then they have kind of practitioner focused articles. And so, for the folks that are more like extension practitioners, the Journal of Extension, if you're looking for a journal that's indexed quite well, the Journal of Extension might be the place to go. Okay, let me share my screen again. Or am I sharing? I am sharing my screen, aren't I? Thumbs up if I'm sharing my screen.
You are. We just had a question pop up in the chat, Dr. Roberts. So we had one that asked, do you think particularly for social science researchers, publication is the only way to access their research impact? What is your opinion for social science?
That's a great question. So it is not the only way, but it is an easy way, and so it's used extensively. And so, you know, truthfully, the impacts of our work occur when practitioners in the field implement the things that we learn from our research, and they're making a difference in communities, on farms, and in organizations. And so that's the ultimate measure of the impact of our work. That can be hard to quantify and measure. And so it's a little bit more difficult to tell the story of that kind of work.
We did have another question. I'm so sorry. They asked, what's the implication of citing one's past work?
That's a great question. So where appropriate, it's perfectly acceptable to cite your previous work. Where I mentioned some unethical practices in the past or earlier in the presentation, there are two common unethical things that happen. One is that a researcher extensively cites his or her own work over and over and over when it may not necessarily be relevant to whatever the new article you're writing. That's one unethical approach. The other unethical approach is there's kind of they call it a citation cartel, right? Where there's 5 or 6 people that kind of agree to collaborate. And maybe I don't cite my own work, but I agreed to cite all of your work, but you also agree to cite my work. That's also unethical. So when in doubt, if you can make a rational judgment that it's appropriate to cite your past work to substantiate the work that you're doing, that's perfectly fine. And if you have a pretty tight research program, that's likely to happen. But if I read one of your articles and half the citations in that article are your own work, that's going to raise a question in my mind about, are you really doing something that's ethical or not?
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. That's all the questions we have so far. So Dr. Roberts, if you want to share your screen again, we'd love to see your profiles.
Okay. So what are you guys seeing right now? Because I'm confused on which screen of mine is which screen. You're seeing the one that has the University of Florida with my name on it?
Yes.
Okay, that's the right one. So why should we be paying attention to this stuff? So this is my profile on the main University of Florida site. So it's a publicly available thing. You can go to the University of Florida site, search researcher profiles, and this will pop up. Up until about a year ago, I did not even realize that this was a thing. And I've since gone in and updated some of my stuff, but this is generated by a group called Academic Analytics. You might see that on the bottom here. I suspect for those of you in North America and those of you in Europe, your universities may very well be a subscriber to Academic Analytics, and they being university administrators are paying attention to what shows up in Academic Analytics as your impact as a researcher. And so even though maybe your department doesn't think this might be important, or you may not have previously thought this was important, chances are somebody at your university does think it's important, and somebody at your university is paying attention, which means therefore as individual researchers, we ought to be paying attention. So I wanted to show you that, and you guys can check to see at your home universities if that's a thing. I suspect for many of you it might be. Now, I'm going to pop up my Google Scholar profile, but I want to give a disclaimer before I do, is that I'm a pretty accomplished researcher, and I've been a researcher in the field for 20 plus years. So don't get intimidated by my numbers. There are few people in the field that have numbers similar to mine, but I did want to show you some of the features that you can see when you're logged into your own account. So when you go to Google Scholar at first, you'll get to this main page, which is the landing site for Google Scholar. And then if you're logged in, you can click on the My Profile, and it'll pull up respective numbers. It'll have a list of all your publications. It will allow you to go in and edit and select what are the terms, what sorts of fields do you want to associate yourself with. And then when you click on one of these, it will show you all the other researchers who picked that same thing, and you can see kind of where you stack up compared to other researchers in that field. So you can be selective about the terms that you use. If you pick something, a very broad term like social science, I suspect that there are hundreds of thousands of researchers that might use social science, which means your page might be page number 777 at the bottom, as opposed to being, so you can think about that. On your citations, once you've been publishing for a while, it keeps track of all of, that's not what I wanted, sorry. There. Over time, so you can see my citations over time. And then it can see your most cited works. I mentioned earlier that my most cited work is the research agenda for the American Association for Agricultural Education. And I can click on that number, and it'll tell me everything that it found that published that cited my work. So it's a way of you being able to see who is citing your work and where your work is being cited by. One other cool thing about Google Scholar that a lot of people don't know about is under the metrics thing on the side, it has metrics for journals as well. So yeah, here's the top three in terms of Google Scholar: Nature, New England Journal of Medicine, and Science. But it will allow you to search journals. So if I'll do extension. And so these are the journals that have extension in the title somewhere. And it lets you see the Journal of Ag and Extension Ed, Journal of Extension, Journal of Agricultural Extension, and so forth. And you can click, so the H5 index are, let me remember what that is for Google. It's in the last 5 years, the number of articles H that were cited H. So in the last 5 years, this journal had 23 articles that were cited 23 times. The average article had 32 citations. And you can see what those are. So these are the articles that were cited over that 5-year period from that respective journal. So you can use Google Scholar as a way of looking at, as I mentioned earlier, in our field, many of the journals that we routinely publish in are not yet in the most exclusive indices. So it's hard to really get a sense for how do they stack up. And so Google Scholar tends to be a good way to do that. Your ORCID profile, again, you can, once you have this set up and you make sure you make it public, you can link your researcher ID and your Scopus. You can also create web links. And so I have my Google Scholar profile as a website link out of my ORCID. And then you can go in and add your employment, your qualifications, professional activities, your funding, and then all of your published works. And then again, once some of these, like the ones with the green checks, or some of these other ones have come in automatically. I didn't have to do anything to get those to come in because they were linked. But then some of them, let me go down. Like this particular one, the NACTA journal. This is one that, because NACTA is not yet fully linked with everything, I had to manually enter that one in. That's ORCID. One thing I do too is in my email, in the signature part of my email, I put my ORCID number at the bottom. And that way, anybody that's curious about my researcher profile, they can just click that link when I send an email and they can go check out the research that I've done. Last thing I'll share is my ResearchGate profile. And again, ResearchGate allows you to load all your stuff in. The cool thing about ResearchGate is, as I mentioned earlier, is you can load in posters, presentations, fact sheets. You can load anything that you choose to into ResearchGate, and you can also assign it an ORCID number, not an ORCID, a DOI number, which gives it then a little bit more citable way. And it's relatively simple to add stuff in. So, and all my stuff's public, so you guys can go poke around if you want to check out my stuff some more. So we've got a little bit of time left, but that wraps up the stuff that I wanted to share. So now I'm happy to answer any remaining questions or offer any thoughts or perspectives that I can. Questions, comments, contradictions even? I will tell you that as a whole, our field has been, if those of you that know Rogers diffusion theory, we are in the late majority in terms of adoption of these sort of approaches. Many of our colleagues who work in other fields adopted this stuff years ago, and consequently, the online presence for much of their work is looks stronger than ours, even though we have a lot of people that are doing really good work. Many of us have less than complete online presences for our work.
Yeah, I would agree to that.
Dr. Roberts, I have a question for you.
Sure, go ahead, Matt.
One thing that I appreciate the presentation, and I have started some of this, but I have found it a challenge to kind of keep up with because I kind of forget about some of these things. And where I do really well with my job, I keep up with tracking some of these pieces on my own or through my own systems, but it's hard to keep track of all this stuff. So what are some strategies that you use to help maintain this presence across multiple areas? Because it's not like you just upload in ResearchGate and everything auto-populates everywhere else. So what are some strategies that you use for either folks that are maybe just getting started or folks like myself that have started, but I have maybe had a hard time maybe keeping up with and maybe haven't made it a priority?
Yeah, that's a great question, Matt. Couple of comments. One, those of you that are earlier in your careers and thus have less stuff to post, you're at an advantage because it won't take you long. I spent probably almost a complete week this summer getting all my full text loaded up into ResearchGate just by it was a process. And so Matt, what I generally recommend and what I try to do is at the end of the year when I'm doing my annual reports is as I'm pulling all together my presentations and my publications and everything else for the year for my annual report, I will just make it a part of the process then to, okay, well, let me open up ResearchGate and see what has not yet been added, and let me go ahead and add it then. Let me open up ORCID and make sure what's there and what's not. And I think, at least for the journal articles, as our journals become better at adopting some of these steps, it'll happen automatically. Where, you know, if a journal's linked right with your ORCID number, chances are it'll get picked up in a lot of places without you having to do anything. It'll be some of the other stuff that you might have to enter manually. But I just try to do it on an annual basis. But again, keep up if you keep up at, you know, those of you that are earlier in your careers, if you just make it a habit now and you stick with it, it'll be a lot easier than having to after the fact when you've got a long record going backwards to get everything caught up.
Wonderful. So Shannon Norris Parrish had a question in the chat. It seemed very similar to Matt's, but in case there's some extra tidbits of information, she said, once you get a new publication, what is your routine or order of importance to get everything updated online? So is there kind of a first step you take of what's number one priority?
Yeah. Very first thing I do is once it's publicly available on the journal website, is I blast it out over social media, over Twitter and over LinkedIn, and then I do Facebook as well. But because my Facebook friends are a mixture of like non-work people and work people, so I blast it out over all three. And then if it's open access, I will generally go add it to ResearchGate, so that anybody that's only has access to ResearchGate can find it that way.
Thank you. I saw a hand up, but it went away. So if there's another question, we have a few more minutes for any final questions for Dr. Roberts. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, again, you've seen Dr. Roberts's profiles, and I'm sure you can go find him on any source online and reach out to him for some advice. He is an accomplished researcher in our field, and so thank you very much, Dr. Roberts, for your time today and for your insight and your expertise into this area. We really appreciate hearing from someone with such experience. So thank you again for your time. If everyone would like to give a round of applause or some type of celebration for Dr. Roberts, we appreciate it. So just as a follow-up for the committee, for those of you that don't know, I am the current chair for the Professional Development Committee for AIAEE. We will be sending this recording out onto the website for AIAEE. So if you want to share it or rewatch it, go back and get some of those great tidbits of information. It will be available to you, and we'll send kind of a notice out to our membership. But again, thank you, Dr. Roberts, for your time. We really, really appreciate it. I took a plethora of notes. I find that this was very helpful for our profession. So thank you very much.
If any of you have any follow-up questions, don't hesitate to shoot me an email or whatever, and I'll try to help you sort it through.
Wonderful. Well, we hope everybody has a great rest of their day. And hopefully we'll see most, if not all of you, at the conference in Florida in April.
See you. Thank you.
Bye, y'all. Have a great day.
Bye.